And we're back, Jonathan.
Yes, another episode of the Road to Code.
We have a guest host today, Mr. Sam Abraham.
That's me.
That is you, yeah. Sam and I go back, and we'll get into our story in a bit. But Jonathan, let's talk about some merch.
Yes, we have merch.
Some swag.
This is the Road to Code official merch with our logo on it.
What do we got?
We have women's t-shirts, regular t-shirts, a tote bag, and a coffee mug.
Yeah. So what if people are broke like us three and they just can't afford to pay these extraordinary prices for the swag?
Yes, so what we are doing is a raffle. So all you have to do is subscribe to the channel, one. And second thing, if you're already subscribed, is leave a comment
On any video?
on any one of our videos, and you'll be entered to be in the raffle to win one of these merchandises.
But what if I have nothing to say?
On your comment, you can just leave, show me the merch.
Excellent. We even give you what to say if you got nothing to say. So at the end of the month, which is every last Sunday of the month, what we do is we wrote a little raffle program that we'll take a list of candidates, and we, based on their row number, we run it through this little program, and it'll randomly pick a number, and it'll say, here's the winner, and it'll announce it live when we do it every last Sunday of the month. And the winner gets to pick a female t-shirt, male t-shirt, tote bag, or a coffee mug. And Sam, for being our guest host, you get to pick an item for yourself and an item for your significant other. You can go ahead and pick whatever you want, and we'll send it out to you.
Oh, nice. Should I pick right now?
You could, or you could pick later. It's up to you. You could think about it.
Okay. Definitely want the mug.
The mug is definitely one that I want too.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. You let us know which one, what's your second item. So can I go ahead and plug in something, Jonathan?
Do it.
There's this little website called Thinkster.io. And if you're familiar with training sites, Thinkster is somewhat unique in the sense that they have a section that allows you to allows you to learn how to build a full stack application, selecting an a la carte set of technologies. So you can go and choose technologies like Vue, React, or Angular, or even Angular JS, and match that up with some server technology like Rails, Django, or what's the other one? Node.js, and mix those two technologies together to build a full stack website. So what I did is I actually added to their library of training videos. So if you scroll down to the .NET section, you can now take any of those front-end technologies and mix it with a .NET API. And you can go ahead and build the API. And when you build the front end, whether you build it in Angular, Vue, or React, you'll be able to hook right into the API that you build by following this tutorial. The first part, all the way up until the authentication and authorization login, is when you actually hit the paywall. Up until that point, everything is free. You can actually go and view those videos and learn how to create your API. You'll learn about using encryption to securely store password information into the database. This is cross-platform. You could either run it on Windows or you can run it on Mac. So check it out over at Thinkster.io. Sam, anything that you want to plug in?
Well, now that you mention it, let's see what I got here. I've been working on a little side project. It's not meant really to do anything. This is the source code for it in GitHub. It's called type cache.
What does it do?
So every now and then people run into .NET reflection and they end up having to access parts of their object, properties or fields by name. And using .NET reflection can take its toll on performance, and it can leave your code like unreadable to the next person who needs to see it. So what type cache does is it gives you an easy way to do reflection without actually having to go into Microsoft's reflection. It'll do the heavy lifting for you. It'll cache a lot of the objects behind the scenes for you. So you just pick an object, you get the properties off of it by name. You can set the properties by name. You can invoke procedures or methods by name. Everything you can do in regular reflection, you can do here, and your code stays readable.
I like the $sign on there.
Yes.
It was
I was trying to think of a logo for this, so I was like, okay, cash. I like cash, money, type. Every type has curly braces, so type cash.
Nice.
I like it.
And this was just born of me writing the same code over and over again at different companies. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to package this up so I don't ever have to rewrite this ever again. And hopefully, you can save some people from doing that as well.
Very cool. So you still, this type cache, when you're going and obviously it uses reflection, right?
Yes.
But the underlying technology of reflection, it still needs to do that heavy lifting at least one time.
Yes. It has an initial cost, but all subsequent costs. So for example, you have a customer object and you want to get and set the name property of that object. The initial time, it does some building of IL, but that IL code is cached, so all subsequent calls will be fast. As fast as setting the property directly.
Got it. Pretty nice. Using reflection.
I have two other packages. I don't know how to get to that from here. Let's see. Oh, here it is. I have two other packages. I wrote something for GraphQL and Restful methods. And for example, for the Restful methods, you point it to a database and it'll generate RESTful endpoints to do insert, update, delete, selects automatically. It's just a proof of concept, but if the front end needed to access a database and they didn't want to have to deal with those back-end developers like me, they could just run this. It'll build out a bunch of endpoints that they can consume right away. I'm constantly making tweaks to it, trying to make it more secure. And I've done the same for GraphQL.
Hang on, stay there. I want to tell Jonathan
yeah.
something. Jonathan, you know that code you wrote for the significant birth dates?
Mm-hmm.
You know how you had to go and create store procedures for the create, read, update, delete on the significant birthday table.
Mm-hmm.
So this would generate the code for you. But going back to this, so all the code that you wrote, Jonathan, to create those APIs, this would generate that code for you. So you just pointed to your table and it would create the API.
Pretty neat.
All the way down to where it builds the SQL and executes it.
Oh, wow.
Is the SQL injection proof?
Yes and no. So I have part of the object is parameters dictionary where you can pass in user input parameters, and that will go through the SQL injection proofing that Microsoft has built in on its SQL parameters. They'll eventually become SQL parameters, but there's other parts where I allow you to dynamically build a where clause, and if you're not careful, SQL injection can occur. So if someone says, well, I'm going to do where first name equals something from an input box. I haven't found a way yet to protect against that, other than to caution people. You know, you have to be a little bit smart when dealing with these endpoints, that when user input should always go through parameters, essentially.
So I remember you had a way of escaping the information. That doesn't take care of the SQL injection?
No, right now, and again, this is just a brain dump of what I've been working on. I allow you to pass in a full-fledged where clause.
Oh, got it.
And I've tried breaking it up into pieces, but it hasn't really, I haven't really found a good way of doing that yet. But I'm always looking into it.
Very cool.
But for now, you just have to be careful, and user input should always go through the parameters. And when you build the where clause, you can reference those parameters as, you know, you name them whatever you want. You pass in the user value, and then you can just reference it in the where clause, where first name equals at first name,
Yeah,
etc. I don't have strict guards against that yet. The GraphQL is a little bit safer because it's not as open. In the GraphQL, you don't get the where clause like you do for the REST endpoint. You pass in a batch of records that get inserted or updated or deleted. And it handles all the CRUD for you. And because everything's parameterized, it's should be SQL injection safe.
very nice.
So it's safer on the GraphQL side than it is on the RESTful side.
And if you're searching the web, can we find you on Google? Can we like go to Google and do a search for type cache? Look at that, Sam 987883 type cache.
Yeah. First one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, so just search on GitHub for type cache, and you're the first hit. Yep, that's it right there.
Oh, that's my code. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, so that'd probably be the easy way to find your code. That's awesome. I like it. That's some
What
pretty
about
cool.
NuGet?
There it is, all three of them.
Ah,
You go to NuGet.org and you can also type in type cache and you'll see all of them there. That's cool. Sweet.
yep.
Thanks
It's all
for-
in .NET 5, and eventually I'll upgrade to .NET 6 when it comes out.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing. That was awesome. That's pretty cool.
You know, it's just a side project that don't intend to make any money off of it, but it's just something that if other developers see it and it's something they can use, then you know, I can get like 100 downloads. I think from 100 distinct users. So maybe it's helping somebody somewhere.
Yeah.
Who run into the situation where they're just rewriting the same code over and over again. They go to the next company and hey, build out an API. It's all the same stuff again.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That is very cool. I like that. That's awesome. So, Sam, we go back quite a few years.
We sure do.
We won't name any companies, but yeah, we worked together back. I think I joined that company in April of 2009. When did you join? We'll just call it that company.
I think I joined in January 2010.
Okay, so almost a year, a few months shy, and I interviewed you.
Yes. I remember one of the questions you asked me was, what is the ABCs of WCF?
That's right.
Geez, I'm trying to think now. I can't.
Address, binding, and configuration.
Wow.
I'll tell you why I know this, because I interviewed for a company in Burbank, and it was the company before that company that you and I worked at. And I went in there with my resume having WCF on it, right? Because I had actually played around with it and I used it in production. And, you know, like any other developer, as soon as you work on it at least once, you're going to put it on your resume, right? Because
Oh yeah.
that's the thing to do. And I had a female interview me, and she asked me questions about WCF, and she asked me, what are the ABCs of WCF? And I could not answer that question, although I was able to answer a lot of her, you know, all her other questions, and everybody was pretty happy with the results of the interview. But her words to me were, if you want to keep this job, when you join, you need to memorize everything about WCF. So what I did, this was back in the days when we were living in Roland Heights, Jonathan, and I drove that little box Scion, the XB,
Mhm.
and I would leave at 5 a.m. my house, and I would go to Corner Bakery, which was a mile away from the job, and I would spend about 2 hours every morning for the next 3 months when I started that company, learning everything possible about WCF, WWF, which is the Windows Workflow Foundation, and all that, you know, all that good stuff. So to me, I figured it must have been important to know this. So I'm going to ask Sam that question. Although I didn't hold you up to the same standard that they held me.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, I ended up knowing a lot about WCF. I haven't worked with WCF in ages. I mean, it's been at least, I don't know, 8-9 years now since I worked with WCF. But yeah, it was really good technology. I liked it. It was fun working with that.
It's been a while. I remember once the Restful stuff came out, that kind of, I don't want to say it killed it, but it kind of, you never had to deal with that configuration anymore.
Yeah,
Things were
RESTful
greatly simplified.
RESTful APIs definitely simplified a lot of things. Yeah, definitely simplified a lot of things. But one of the things that really stood out to me about you, Sam, is when I asked you one time, I said, what'd you do this weekend, Sam? And you said, oh, you thought about it for a moment. He's like, yeah, he goes, I think I just read the HTML5 spec over the weekend. And I was like, are you serious? And you're like, yeah, I enjoy doing stuff like that. You know?
I was such a nerd.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Jonathan? That the HTML5 spec. I mean, he like literally spent time online reading the specifications for HTML5, you know? So that stood out to me. And the more I work with you, I didn't believe you when you said that. Okay. But the more the more I work with you, the more evidence showed that is a very likely possibility that weekend you probably spent reading the HTML5 specification, because of the knowledge, the depth of knowledge of the technology that you knew was just like far beyond. And I think what solidified the fact that is more than likely true, that you did read the HTML5 spec, was I was reading a book on advanced C#, and I actually have the book. I got one of them here, but it was something to, I forget exactly what it was, but as I read it, it was, what are, oh man, it was a question. I forget exactly what the question was, but it was like the fundamentals, not the fundamentals, but the foundation or something of the .NET framework. And you're like, ooh, like, I know. And you said interfaces, enumerations, interfaces,
Classes,
enumeration, structs.
And, what was the other one? I don't remember now. Those class, structs, interfaces, enums, and delegates.
Yes. And I forget exactly what the question was in the book. And I turned around. I was like, oh, I go, this is something that Sam might not know. I was like, let me ask him. And you just blurted it right out. I was like, I think I have to believe that this man actually spent that weekend. And this was like several years later when I asked you that question, that it solidified the fact that I think he did spend the weekend that few years ago reading the HTML5 specification. So just to kind of finalize that, Sam, did you really spend the weekend reading the HTML5 specifications?
Yeah, I actually remember all of this. I remember why I did too, because at the time I was trying to figure out a way of building HTML on the server side. And the problem I ran into with HTML4 was you had, it could be XML compliant, it could be XML partially compliant, or it can be old HTML compliant. There were like these 3 or 4 flavors of it. And I was like, well, if I use an XML DOM to do it, I can't create certain types of HTML and vice versa. If they only just had one standard. And then I was like, oh, HTML5 is coming out and they're going to unify all of this. And that's why I was reading it. But then over time, I kind of abandoned that whole building markup on the server. It had worked well at another company I worked at, Universal Music Group. But that was only because we were using the Yahoo library front-end framework, which was atrocious. But then other front-end frameworks started to pick up speed, and it started looking like, hey, people want to build their markup on the front end now. But that was, that was a time when I was trying to do something in the back end. I was gonna, replace web forms and everything. But it's just one of the projects I abandoned.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's kind of where I realized that you were a different type of developer and
A nerd. Go ahead, say it.
far beyond a nerd, because I think a nerd still tries to have a life, and not read the specifications of some consortium. And so yeah, but it was something always. If I ever had some weird questions, Sam was the person that I would ask. It's like, Sam, we're using system.int, but there's a system.int16, there's an int32, and there's an int64. I said, should I be using the int64 instead of? He like, no, stay with the system.int because it automatically adjusts to whatever processor you're using, and you don't have to worry about how many bits are there, whether it's 32 or 64. So just stay with system.int, and it'll fix itself. And I was like, oh. I was like, okay. But yeah, Sam always had the answers to obscure questions like that, and so it was some good knowledge, or a good resource to have around. You and I worked on, us three were talking about tech birthdays in our earlier segment. And the name Bjorn Straussman came up, and you said you had a story you want to talk about.
Oh, geez, I'm trying to think. Bjorn Straustrup. He had a website and on the website he had Q&A, and there were people who would ask him about garbage collection and he would shoot them down. I did have a story. I can't remember it now.
Yeah, you were saying, well, I think that the topic came up because you thought that he still worked at Bell Labs, but I recently heard, and let me verify this. Let me share my screen, and I will do a quick Google search.
The last I saw his website was in 2015, I think 2016. And that time, I think he was still with Bell Labs.
Who wrote the Golang? Oh, Ken Thompson. I was wrong.
Oh, okay. That makes sense because I can't imagine Bjorn Stroustrup straying from the C syntax ever.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I was wrong. I thought Bjorn actually wrote it, but it was Ken Thompson went to
Oh, you know the other reason why he wouldn't have done it is because they did away with inheritance in Golang. Isn't that right?
It's memory save, garbage collection, structural typing, CSP style concurrency. Let's see. Let's do a quick search on inheritance. An interface system in place of virtual inheritance and type embedding instead of non-virtual inheritance. So they're actually using the interface system. And you're right, they got rid of inheritance. Interesting. That's pretty interesting. Interesting that Ken Thompson. So, okay, so going back to Bjorn Straussman, is that his name? Bjorn
Bjorn Stroustrup.
Straustrup, yeah. So he doesn't, why is he so, why was he, because he passed away, right?
Actually, I don't know. I haven't looked him
What
up
was it?
lately.
Was it Ken Thompson that passed away? Oh, no, there was another gentleman in our birthday list.
Oh, the founder of C passed away in 2011, I think it was.
Dennis Ritchie. Yeah, Dennis Ritchie passed away. So yeah, so Ken Thompson and Bjorn Straustrup still alive. And you were saying that he does not believe in garbage collection. He doesn't believe in any of that stuff. He feels that the developer should take care of that. But I would feel that that's like strictly for a C language, not like a C++ or anything like that. Would that be the reason why, or is there another reason why you shouldn't use garbage collection?
I have to remember the reasons why he gave on the website, but he didn't like the idea of garbage, your program being interrupted by a process to collect garbage memory. And if that garbage memory was ever reaccessed, he would expect it to be all zeros, all nulled out, and not to have garbage material in it. He also believed, and wrongly so, that the smart pointer that originally came with a standard template library was like God's gift to programming. With this, all your garbage collection woes are gone. And then as multitasking and multi-threaded systems came about, people found that the smart pointer was broken and didn't work in a multi-threaded setting. And so as they improved the C++ standard, I think they're on C++, they give it a weird versioning. I think it's OX20 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think the year is part of the versioning. And I don't know why they went with the 0x. I think they're just trying to be fancy. They came up with 3 new smart pointers to handle in different situations. And then recently, and when I say recently, I'm talking maybe 2018 or 2019, I read an article saying how all 3 pointers fail at what they were assigned to do. So the thing about C++ is it suffers from what every language suffers from. It has something called operator new and operator delete. And because that's the only way to allocate and deallocate memory, and because they're operators, they're like global functions that you can never override or control. That's a design flaw in the language that should be fixed. But because there are people on the standards committee who say, hey, this language needs to be backwards compatible always and forever.
Yep.
That design flaw can never be fixed. They can try to work around it by giving you tools to do so. But the design flaw, I feel, is so big, you'll never have memory leak-free C++ code. It's a pipe dream.
So Jonathan, just to kind of explain it in in a beginner's term. So as you write a class, right, you're creating a blueprint, and the sandbox environment or the runtime, consider the blueprint, the actual physical blueprints to build a house, right? And the runtime environment are the construction workers. And so the runtime has to take that blueprint and physically build that in memory. So what Sam's talking about is the fact that as a developer, you should be responsible about allocating the amount of memory you need in order to take that blueprint and realize it in memory. And then when you're done, you should also go and remove any references to that object that you have in memory. But in addition to that, you go and you zero out anything that you created in memory and not leave the equivalency to space junk in memory. Would that be about right, John? Sam?
Yes.
So that's kind of, the C language, you actually physically have to allocate memory, put realize your blueprints into memory, take up that memory space, and then there is no garbage collection. There's nothing like, there's that memory still being used. So if you don't go and clear it out yourself, now you've created a memory leak, and that memory will never be reused until that machine restarts. And so eventually your program would just take up the memory and stop working. So what garbage collection does, it actually automates that process. So you can go and create an object, say a string, a number, whatever, it goes into memory, and then you can forget about it, and garbage collection will go behind and go and clean that up for you so that memory can be reused. Is that about right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what's happened in more recent times, and this is probably the downfall of C++ for web development or a wide array of application developments, is it's a security flaw. So when you have a memory leak, you have objects still in memory that another program can go ahead and read. And if you had a list of customer records with social security numbers, well, that program just read some private information. So in the age of computers having viruses, it's very important that if you have a banking application or anything like that, that you clear out the memory, so that if your system is compromised, there's, even if your system's compromised, that memory won't get read. And I think C++, its glory days are behind it. They can't fix that design flaw without breaking, making a breaking change to the language.
So it's just something that's just being inherited. I mean, it's almost like saying, we're going to swap out the light signals out in the street for a different type of signal. And if you do that overnight, you're just going to break traffic. There's going to be traffic jams everywhere. So
we're going to introduce purple.
Purple, yeah, you introduce purple, and people are not going to know what to do with this purple light on a traffic signal. So you got to keep everything the same. But when you create a new street, you can introduce a stop sign, and that stop sign would make sense on that new street. You can go and say, oh, there's no traffic signal here, but there's a stop sign. I guess I need to stop and check to make sure that there's no cross traffic. But you couldn't go and replace a light signal with a stop sign where people expect a light signal. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah.
Probably a bad analogy, but that's cool. Okay. All right. So, cool. Now that we've established who you are, Sam, how we met, and where our history comes from, let's talk a little bit about you, and we'll let you speak to the comfort level that you're comfortable with. And my whole thing is getting to the point where you decided to get into programming. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And what did you want to be when you grew up? And at what point did did you make that decision? I'm going into programming.
Well, I wish it was like you know, a magical thing. Like when I was a kid, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be a software developer. Because when I was growing up, there were no computer programmers. There weren't that many, and it wasn't considered a viable career option at the time. This is like early 80s. And no one knew that technology would take off like it did. And so I don't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Like I never knew. I saw the movies Blues Brothers, but I didn't want to be part of a band either. So I just like the fact that they were running from the police. But like I mentioned before, a history teacher in high school told me, you know, my guidance counselor was asking me, like, what do you want to do after high school? Like, what do you want to do for a career? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to make money. Like, what do I do to make a lot of money? And, you know, they had these little tests you take in high school to see, you know, your likes and dislikes. And at the end, they tell you, you know, what's the best career for you.
Do
I
they
did
still
that. You know what they gave me?
hang on, Jonathan? Do they still give those tests?
Yeah, they do. I think they have a name now too. It's like a
Like an aptitude test or something?
yeah.
What was yours?
The first time I've ever done it, I think it was like it said I should be like a tour guide or something.
It told me I should be a truck driver. And I was like, because they asked you questions like, do you like to travel? I'm like, well, yeah, I like to. Sure, why not? I'm like, truck driver? Are you kidding me? And so I spoke to this one history teacher, and he was telling me about how his son went into electrical engineering, and to pay for college, he went into the Navy. And I was like, you know what? Okay, that sounds good to me. I'll be an electrical engineer. So when I go to college, I'll be an electrical engineer. I joined the Army when I was in 10th grade to help pay for that. Well, the Army didn't quite work out, and it wasn't what I thought it would be. In fact, I hated it. I met a lot of shady characters in the Army. And
No,
you know,
are you talking about like peers, or are you talking about superiors?
There's mostly peers, because the superiors would treat you as if you were one of them.
Okay.
Like they treated me badly because they thought, oh, this guy's a drug dealer or some other criminal who's in the Army trying to, you know, make up for prison time. And it's just it was such a horrible experience. So I quit the Army, and when I finally got to college, it was the Hispanic scholarships that paid for most of the tuition.
When you quit, you say that you end your contract, or you
No, I left. My mother was friends with some senators, and they got me out. I was in the Army Reserves for a year and a half. I think 2 years, actually.
Okay, all right.
My junior year and senior year in high school.
So somehow or other you managed.
Yeah, she got me out.
You got some kind of loophole that got you out.
Yeah, no, it was more a senator talking to some sergeant type of thing.
Okay.
I was also trying to get into West Point at the same time, and I needed you need to have 2 senators write you a referral letter. But here's the funny thing: at the end of my junior year, I spent a week in West Point before I went off to basic training. And the reason why I was looking at West Point is like, it's free college. There's no tuition, it's free. They give you a computer, they give you a place to stay. I'm like, who wouldn't want that? And I stayed there for a week, and these seniors they were sitting with me at lunch, and they realized, you're a lot smarter than these other people here. Why do you want to come to West Point? I told them, you know, look, I'm from a poor family. I can't afford tuition. I need to get my degree. And they're like, what other schools are you applying to? I'm like, oh, Swarthmore, WPI, Rensselaer, Virginia Polytech. And they're like, if you're applying to those schools and you can think you can get into one of them, you don't want to go here to West Point. I'm like, really? They're like, this place is not for smart people. If you want to take orders and be told what to do, that's West Point. If you want to have a career and make something of yourself and you can get into WPI, go to WPI. The following week, I went to basic training knowing this. And I was like, I did something very stupid. I'm now stuck in the Army. I have these senators writing letters to West Point for me to get in there. And now I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Long story short, when I picked a college, I also made another mistake. I thought you need to go to the most fanciest, famous college possible. I was even trying to get into MIT. When I realized that, when I look back, I had passed up a full scholarship to Virginia Polytech, a full scholarship for this one university in Detroit. Now I know I said Detroit's not such a safe area, but that scholarship would have also given me a full-time job while being a student. And anyone who's ever been a student knows that you're dirt broke. And to have a job is like, it's sacred.
Yeah.
I turned all that down and went to WPI and
What was your major there?
electrical engineering. So I took a calculus class, a physics class, and whatever they required. But in the second quarter, there wasn't trimesters, there were quarters. I took a course on circuits. I hated circuits. I couldn't figure out how they worked. I couldn't understand what a transistor was, capacitor. I was like, this sucks. I can't do this. So I went into computer science.
Oh, interesting.
I changed my major. And I was like, okay, I can do programming. I learned C. They took a course, they did another course in C++. I did that. I think this is awesome. Like I should have picked this career. The next course was C++ with data structures. And then I took assembler and I hated it. And all the courses I was taking was assembler, writing low-level operating system functions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not C and C++. Like, why would you want to use this once you know a higher level language? Then I changed my major to math, took a bunch of math courses, and that was it.
So you graduated with a math degree?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I had a minor in computer science, but I didn't just graduate. I went into a BS MS program because I wanted to get a master's in applied statistics.
Mhm.
And if I went another year, I would have got that. But halfway through my senior year, I got a job. My sister worked at a semiconductor company, and they were like, we were desperate for a Visual Basic developer. Do you know anyone? And she said, well, my brother can do it. I'm like, what? Visual Basic? Now, I have been doing office jobs writing Excel macros, and I guess that's in Visual Basic, but she sold me as a full Visual Basic developer. And so I went for the interview, and I'm just pretending like I know everything. And the guy's asking me, would you be able to take this spreadsheet and do this? I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Why not?
you gotta fake it until you make it, right?
That's right. And then he asked me, what's your hourly rate? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, most contractors charge $200 an hour. Like that's my hourly rate. Yes, that's for this, yeah, $200 an hour. And
he thought he was getting the bargain, and you thought you were getting a bargain. So both people with the bargain, it's like
win-win.
Win-win.
And I was working there like 10 hours a week. And then he kept saying, Sam, I need you to come in Saturday. Sam, I need you to work more hours. We got more spreadsheets to do, more data to crunch. And when it got to 40 hours a week, I went to my academic advisor at WPI and I told him, look, I'm making like close to like $8,000 to $10,000 a week now before taxes. This is what I would wanted when I was a kid, was to make a lot of money. And now I'm doing that. I can't do that and continue with this master's program. And he looked at, he used to code in Fortran 77. So he'd always be sitting next to his monitor like this. And then for the first time, he actually, he would always talk to me, but he never stopped coding. And this is the first time he actually looked up, and he looked up at me like this and said, Samuel, if you lead this program, this BSMS program, you're going to fail at whatever you do. And then he just continued sitting there programming. And I was like, how do you know? Like, where do you come up with that? And so I thought to myself, you know what? I need to do what I think is best for myself. And so I canceled out of the program. I got my bachelor's, but I didn't get the master's. And I continued doing that job. And then it got crazy. It went from 40 hours, 60 hours. I was a 1099 contractor, and in Massachusetts, anything past 40, you charge time and a half. Anything past 60, you charge double time.
Oh my goodness.
And I was doing 80-hour weeks, and I'm paying off like mad tuition. And I was like, this is crazy. And then, you know the stock market, the tech bubble crash of 2000, and then it climbed back up in 2001, but then popped again. Well, after that first crash, there were no jobs in tech anywhere. It had shut down.
Yeah.
In fact, when my contract ended, and he said, you wrote enough code, we have what we need. My first full-time job was paying $55,000 a year doing C++, same company. So I was doing something very easy and making $50,000 maybe every month or 2 months. I went from that to writing hardcore C++ using MFC and ATL, writing code that would output language to move wafer robots and other hardware on the system, making so much less.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the time, I was lucky to have that job because there were no jobs in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jonathan, MFC is Microsoft's Foundation Core or something like that?
Microsoft's Foundation classes.
Foundation classes, which are the ones that
it was the precursor.
You would use them to communicate with the operating system, right?
No, it was like a framework, the precursor to .NET.
Oh, okay.
It gave you like, there was a C list, C array. Oh, every class started with the letter C because Microsoft thought, oh, that's a naming convention. Since interfaces start with I, classes have to start with C. But what they didn't realize is no one followed that. They only use I for interfaces, classes they didn't really care about.
Yeah.
And you would think they had a C object, and that was supposed to be the root object for the framework. But because the framework's really old and they couldn't like redo parts of it, every object, whether it was a C list, a C string, or anything, a C font, it all inherited from C window. Window was a base object. It was kind of a messed up framework. And the last version of Visual Studio that had it was Visual Studio 6. And then from there, they went to .NET.
What does ATL stand for?
That's the active template library.
Oh, okay.
That was used for creating COM objects with COM interfaces. And
Got it.
it was so hard to use because you had to declare an interface, your object, and then you had an IDL file which described the interface in some language. And the person consuming your COM object had to know, oh, you're sending me this type of data. It was a nightmare.
So let me ask you, you went from getting your bachelor's to earning buku bucks with some VB script, which is basically macros,
Yeah.
and then to dirt poor programmer, like doing some extensive C++ type of programming, and then eventually you jump into .NET. When did that happen?
Towards the end of my time at that company, because I was eventually laid off, the company would lay off every few months. It was like a group of people would get an axe, and it was very demoralizing for everyone who worked there. But before I got the axe, Visual Studio 7 came out, except it wasn't called Visual Studio 7. It was called Visual Studio, I think it was 2001. They started using the year numbers.
Yep.
And I would download a trial version of it and play around with it. And I was like, oh, okay, they moved the code over here. This is over here. And instead of the DSW file, which was a workspace file, they have a solution file. Instead of a DSP, which was a project file, they now have a CS proj.
Yep.
I was just looking at all the comparisons, and I started learning about it there because I was like, hey guys, why don't we start using this instead of COM?
What year was that?
This was late 2001.
Okay.
I was let go, I think, a couple months after 9/11, during one of the layoffs. And at that point, I was out of work for almost a year. Like, I had little contracts here and there, but it was like a horrible tech recession. And it was so bad that when I finally did take a position, it was in 2003, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona. So I actually had to move out of Boston. And that was my first .NET position, and I joined it as a senior .NET developer. Because, what do you say? You have to fake it before you make it.
That's cool. So let me ask you, what 3 pieces of advice would you give yourself when you first became a programmer?
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, think about back when you took your, I guess your buku buck contractor job writing VB
I
script.
thought that was actually, after all the bad decisions I had made through college and everything, I thought that was the one good decision I finally took.
I think it was, because you paid off your loans through that, right?
Yeah. It was pretty nice. I later regretted it because once the contract ended and I took that full-time position, I was thinking, should I have stayed in that master's program? And I look back now and I realize, no, because applied statistics, I would have been what, a data scientist? I know for a while, like back 2013 to 2017, there was a high demand for data scientists. But when you compare that to the demand for software developers, there's no comparison.
Yep.
And then people used to say, well, one day they're going to hire robots to write code. No. To stay. And if you know how to write code, you're always going to have a job for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. The thing that I know for a fact is not I wouldn't say ever going to happen, but I don't think we're going to see it in our lifetime, is quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and machines writing programs. Those three things, I just don't see it in our lifetime.
Yeah, I see artificial intelligence coming to rise, but I don't see quantum computing for the next at least 20 years. They might have it in the lab, and they might, you might have access to it remotely, but it's one company owning one computer at the moment. It's not something that's widespread.
Yeah.
It might be the future, but we won't know for another 20 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember we saw that picture of that microchip that looked like a piece of garbage with something smeared on it. Right now, that's where quantum computing is.
Yeah. What is one thing that you struggle with, that what was it that you struggled with when you first began that you still struggle with today when it comes to technology?
Oh, that's a good question. Because I struggle with so many things. Um, I've struggled with SQL Server.
SQL Server.
It's people tell me I know SQL inside out, but there's still times when SQL Server, and maybe it's true for other database technologies, but SQL Server in particular does things that when it hits you for the first time, you're like, oh my God. And then you panic and you're like, okay. So I'll give you an example. Recently, instead of writing CRUD methods, we had store procedures that did both update and insert using merge, the merge keyword. It worked fine. We have like 20 or 30 procedures that have merges. You don't have to worry about it. If the front end passes primary key, we know do an update. If they don't, do an insert. It's so simple. Well, we tried to group a bunch of those merges in a transaction, and it blew up. And then I'm scrambling, like going online, what's going on? Is there something wrong with transaction scope? This and that. And then I realized, wait a minute, could it be something with merge? So I typed in Google merge and deadlocks, and boom. It's something that when I dug deep, Microsoft won't fix, and they acknowledge it's an existing problem. And SQL Server has had many surprises like that at the last minute leave you scrambling to rewrite code, to pull stuff out. It's been a pain point. And I have to say that over the years, C# has gotten better, web technology's gotten better, everything's gotten better, IDEs, but not SQL. It's the same old junk we've been using since SQL 2000.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't they make this better? Like, why can't they improve this? Sometimes I'm searching for something, instead of coming up with SQL Server results, it's like, oh, Oracle has this. MySQL has this. And I'm like, no, I need SQL Server. Oh, no, it doesn't have it. I feel like I don't know. It's like, are they working on something new that's going to replace this? Is that why they're not adding new features?
No.
It seems like they're dragging their feet. I remember they were going to replace the Enterprise Manager IDE with Visual Studio. And they did something with it in Visual Studio 2010. But they've never improved upon it since.
Yeah.
It's the same UI.
Now they have Visual Studio Data Manager, which is Visual Studio Code, but with a data management aspect to it. So you can download it. It looks like Visual Studio Code, but it's Visual Studio Data Manager. But you can still download. I still prefer to use SQL Server Management Studio, the SSMS.
Well, I find that to do certain things, like convert a database into a DAC for example, you have to do it through Visual Studio. And it's like, why is there hidden functionality outside of that standard IDE? Like, do they want us to use Visual Studio for everything? And I don't mind doing that, but even doing our database deployments to this day at Scorpion, we're using DAC packs, something that's like 20 years old.
Yep.
We're using SQL projects that haven't changed since they were created.
Yep.
I don't understand why, you know, and SQL Server makes a lot of money for Microsoft. I don't understand why they don't want to improve anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know what they're working on, and then you're right. It's become antiquated. They've never, unless you're using Redgate.
Yeah,
SQL
and
Server,
Redgate's not cheap. You
not.
have to use some other expensive tool
Yeah,
to help you with something that usually had everything built in, but
yeah,
it's becoming antiquated and it's scary.
yeah,
It's like, what do you use instead of SQL Server?
yeah. No,
I mean, it's built into Azure now.
yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely, it has become antiquated. They don't provide an easy way, unless you're using entity frameworks where you could use data migrations to update your database. But other than that, that's you don't have anything other than a $10,000 database server, and then you got to pay another $10,000 for Redgate
Yeah,
to write the code that will help you upgrade.
and you asked me for something that I struggled with, I say my entire career as a software developer. I have to say it's the SQL database, because time and time again, it manages to screw me in one way or another. And it seems like every time we upgrade SQL Server, we don't get that much. It's almost like, maybe they're fixing stuff that we don't see in the back end and how they manage the database,
Probably.
but they're not giving us new features and they're not fixing old features. And I remember back in 2016 or 2017, I was reading about how Microsoft was going to introduce the upsert to replace the merge. And it was just going to do either an update or an insert. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's what we need. And then they scrapped that idea. I'm like, why? We need this now. We needed it yesterday.
I think it was because of an infringement on, I don't know if it's Oracle that has the upsert.
But they could have called it something else. You call it merge 2.
Like daytime 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't understand. And then the JSON minimal. Like, we have a rule, don't do JSON and store procedures. Why? Because whatever SQL Server gives you to use isn't good enough. It doesn't perform well.
Yeah.
So we still store JSON in SQL. I think everyone's doing that now, but we don't use it in SQL Server. We only use it in code.
Yeah.
And I have to say that's my pain point from day one is SQL Server.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to point to any other databases because I don't, I read about Oracle. SQL Server has like 4 windowed functions. Oracle has like 20, and they're adding more as time goes on.
Yep.
SQL Server, that's been my pain point from day one.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, you wanna kick off some miscellaneous questions?
Uh-oh. You didn't tell me about this.
Well, you got the list of questions that we're gonna ask you.
But I didn't read it.
I'll do one. What talents do you possess that not a lot of people know?
Ooh, I can. Jeez. Let's see, legal talents. Jeez, I gotta think. I'm very good at rewriting SQL. I mean, it's a painful talent that I've gotten good at thanks to the company that Vic and I worked at. And that's something that people have noticed at Scorpion. Like, do you mean talents outside of software?
It could be anything, yeah.
Anything.
Oh, I'm a good dad. My kids love me.
That's what you think. All right. I got one. What is your favorite dev tool?
Let's see. You know, have you ever used IntelliJ Writer?
No, I haven't.
That was the same people who made ReSharper. They actually made a nice .NET IDE. It's written in Java though, sadly, because they did the IntelliJ for Java. But when I started at Scorpion, we started using that IDE until management changed, and then this person said, go back to Visual Studio. But when I did use Writer, I found that it was a much faster developing experience than Visual Studio.
Is it free or you have to pay for it?
It's you have to pay for it.
Oh, that's probably why management went back to the free tool.
Yeah. But it was pretty good. And it also had a lot of database management tools built into it. So you didn't have to go to the SSMS or anything else. It was a pretty good tool. And the last I used it was in 2019, I want to say.
Okay.
And it wasn't just actually, if I was able to dig into it further, you could probably use it in place of Visual Studio Code for Angular. And imagine being able to use the same IDE for your backend and front end code. It would have been nice, but I'm not able to use it anymore. But I'd like to put it out there. If anyone, you know, Writer looks pretty neat.
Okay. Jonathan?
All right. If you had the opportunity to work with somebody alive or dead, who would that be and why?
Let's see, alive or dead. Work with somebody. I would have to say Albert Einstein.
I knew you were going to say that.
Obviously, you're my first choice, Vic. If I could work with you again, that would be awesome. But you mentioned dead or alive. Why is your nose
growing, Sam? Why is your nose growing?
No, because I was going through the list of dead people first, and Albert Einstein. And here's the reason why Albert Einstein, not just his theory of relativity or any of the physics stuff. I'd like to ask him, you know, Albert, I see a lot of quotes that you said on LinkedIn. Can we go through these and you tell me which ones you actually said? And the ones that are made up? I'd like to know.
All right. Got a fun question, Sam. What would be the theme song of your life?
Happening. Have you ever seen the show What's Happening?
Yes.
It goes. That's what I imagine the theme songs of my life.
Hold on. Let's look at that. Let's look at that theme song. Let's see here. So it's going to be we'll go to YouTube.
Good old YouTube.
And it's What's Happening theme song.
Oh, there we go.
This one right here, right? Let's see. That one's a minute. This one's 53. Is that the same one? Oh, this is the original right here. All right. Are you able to hear my sound?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So is that what you say would be your theme song?
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Jonathan?
Oh, there's a lot of old ones there. Welcome back, Cotter.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right. Another fun question. What is one thing you'd like to cross off your bucket list?
This
Ooh.
year.
Oh, this year.
Yeah.
Bucket list. I'll tell you what. There's a city called Sochi in Russia. And in Sochi, they do bungee jumping. But not the American bungee jumping where you wear a harness and you jump off the edge. They follow the original African bungee jumping where they tie something to your foot and then you jump off and you fall head first. I think if I were to do that, I could do anything. And it's not a small jump. It's 300 meters or something.
But what if you get there and you can't do it?
Well, I'm sure there's other things to do in Sochi, Russia. And of course, I'd go during summer because it's Russia.
All right. I got one. If you could play a scene in a movie, what would it be and which character would you play?
Let's see. Debbie does.
Not very many people are going to get that one.
Then there's Basic Instinct.
Let's keep it PG-13.
I think I'd like to play Newman. God. And, in Jurassic Park, the first movie, postal employee Newman from Seinfeld had a part, and he's running around, and eventually I think a dinosaur picked up a Jeep he was in and threw him. I'd like to play him in that movie because it seemed like such a silly character and what was supposed to be a more serious movie.
It just came out to be something silly.
And unlike him, I don't think I would have gotten killed by the dinosaur. I would have ran somewhere.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right. Let's see. All right. If a millionaire decides to fund you all your expenses paid 1 week trip to anywhere, where would you go besides Russia?
And what would you do?
Oh, I wouldn't be Russia. I would go to, let's see. I always wanted to go to Greece.
Greece.
Like one of the beach towns in Greece. I love Greek food, Greek coffee. Yeah, Greece.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that right now Greece and Turkey are having wildfire issues, which kind of sucks because California also has wildfires. It's like, why are all the good places I like burning?
Yeah, I hear you.
In 2019, I had to evacuate the house with my family because the police came by with an announcer saying we have to evacuate. And I stayed in the Canoga Park Hotel. I don't know if you've seen that. There used to be a Ramada Inn on DeSoto, but now there's a Canoga Park Hotel, and we stayed there the night. until they said it was safe for us to come back.
This was when you were living in Canoga Park?
No, this was here in Santa Clarita.
Oh,
Um,
there's a Canoga Park hotel?
yes. And it's exactly how it sounds. Because when I went to get a room, he asked me how many hours.
You're like 24? Is there anything less?
Oh, did we lose him? Oh,
Vic, did we lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm here. You know, my internet's been
there we
spotty.
go.
Oh, we lost you for a second.
Yeah, my internet's been
Yeah.
spotty. It's been a little spotty. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. All right, we'll do a couple more questions. If you had to choose a name for your best friend, would it be Bob or Chuck? And why?
Ooh, Bob or Chuck? I like Chuck. Sounds like, Chuck Norrisy.
All right. All right.
I like it. I like it.
If I had a third choice, I'd go with Bubba. I'd like to get a phone call like, oh, hey, Bubba.
All right, Jonathan, we'll let you ask one last question and we'll close this segment off.
All right. What would you like to be known for?
Other than type cache.
Right. I'd like to be known for something more profound. I would like to be known for coming up with the Israeli-Palestine peace deal.
Wow, that is profound.
Not gonna happen, but it would be nice. It'd be nice to have that on my tombstone. Here lies Samuel Abraham. By the way, folks, he brokered the peace deal between Palestine and Israel. I don't know.
All right, very cool. Well, I think we should wrap this one up here. We've been through all our segments and we spent almost 4 hours together here. We've had a blast. It was really fun having you, Sam. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, no problem. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to check out your type cache open source on GitHub, and you can also download it as a NuGet package. You can probably reach out to Sam that way too and ask him questions, or if you need updates on a documentation, or if you find a bug, you probably submit it to him.
Oh, there's no documentation, by the way. I have to work on that.
Any final thoughts, Jonathan?
No. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and speaking with you today.
Hey, no problem. It was nice seeing you again, Vic, after all these years.
Yeah. We got to get together. We got to have some El Pollo Loco chicken or something.
Yeah, we used to always have that in Canoga Park. El Pollo Loco.
El Pollo Loco. Every time we ask Sam, like, where do you want to go? You're like, we'll go to El Pollo Loco. All right. Well, until next time, peace.
Bye.
See you guys later.